What if the universe was already listening to you, waiting for a single moment of certainty before it moved? What if everything you've been struggling to force for years could begin rearranging itself tonight, while you sleep? Imagine waking up tomorrow morning with a strange sense of calm, only to discover that money, opportunities, and solutions are already moving toward you. Not someday, not slowly, but within the next 24 hours. Most people have never been told this truth, and even fewer ever test it. But tonight, you're about to learn how to command reality itself to respond. There is a reason you found this message. Not by accident. Not by chance. Somewhere deep inside you, there is a knowing that life is meant to flow differently than it has. You've worked hard. You've waited patiently. You've done everything you were told would lead to abundance. And yet, something still feels blocked. The bills keep showing up. The pressure never fully lifts. And the promise of all one day keeps moving further away. But what if the delay was never outside of you? What if the universe has always been ready and the only thing missing was the correct inner command? Before we go any further, pause for a moment and consider this. Every major transformation in human history began not with action, but with an assumption. Empires rose because someone assumed authority before they ever held power. Wealth was created because someone felt rich long before the numbers confirmed it. The universe does not respond to effort. It responds to certainty. And tonight, you're going to learn how to enter the only mental state the universe cannot ignore. Most people believe prosperity comes from struggle. They've been conditioned to think that money requires sacrifice, exhaustion, and endless waiting. This belief is so deeply ingrained that it feels like common sense. But it's one of the most destructive ideas ever planted in the human mind. Because the universe does not reward suffering, it mirrors belief. It does not respond to how hard you try. It responds to what you quietly accept as true when no one is watching. Think about this carefully. Two people can work equally hard. One remains stuck, the other rises effortlessly. The difference is not intelligence, it is not luck, it is not timing, it is assumption. One assumes life resists them, the other assumes life supports them. And the universe, with absolute precision, agrees with both. This is the hidden law that governs all manifestation. Not hope, not wishing, not prayer spoken from desperation, but assumption felt as fact. And there is one moment in your day when assumption becomes extraordinarily powerful. A moment when resistance dissolves, when doubt loses its grip, when the subconscious mind opens like fertile soil. That moment is right before sleep. In the final minutes before you drift off, the logical mind quiets. The inner arguments fade. The subconscious steps forward, ready to receive instruction. Whatever you accept as real in this state does not remain a thought. It becomes a command, and the universe must obey. Most people unknowingly sabotage themselves every night. They fall asleep replaying worries, counting bills, rehearsing fear. They drift into sleep carrying the emotional signature of lack, and then they wake up confused as to why tomorrow looks exactly like yesterday. They don't realize they programmed it. But tonight, you're going to do something different. The universe does not require long explanations. It does not need begging. It does not respond to emotional desperation. It responds to completion. When something is felt as finished, the wheels of reality begin turning instantly. This is why imagination, when used correctly, is more powerful than decades of physical effort. Because imagination is the language of creation. You are not here to ask the universe for wealth. You are here to declare it finished. There is a profound psychological truth that few ever grasp. The subconscious mind does not understand time. It does not recognize later, soon, or eventually. It only knows now. Whatever feels real now becomes law. This is why saying, "I will be wealthy," keeps wealth permanently out of reach. It affirms lack in the present moment. But when you assume wealth now, even without evidence, you speak directly to the creative center of reality. This is not denial. This is causation. Everything you see around you was once invisible. Every bank balance, every opportunity, every relationship began as an inner assumption. The physical world is not the cause. It is the echo, and the echo always follows the sound. If you could see how quickly reality rearranges itself after a true inner shift, you would never doubt this law again. People would call it coincidence. They would say you got lucky, but you would know better. You would know that the response began the moment you stopped asking and started assuming. There is a reason ancient teachings placed such emphasis on night. Not as superstition, but as science of the soul. The moment before sleep is sacred because it bypasses the conscious gatekeeper. Words spoken here do not stay on the surface. They sink, they imprint, they become instructions. Tonight, you are not going to repeat dozens of affirmations. You are not going to visualize endlessly. You are going to speak one simple declaration, a phrase so complete that it carries no tension. A phrase that signals to the subconscious that the work is finished. But before I give it to you, you must understand the state it must be spoken from. The universe does not respond to words. It responds to feeling. The feeling is the command. Words are merely the vehicle. You could whisper a single sentence with absolute conviction and move mountains, while another person could shout 1,000 affirmations and change nothing. The difference is not volume. It is belief. Belief is not something you force. It is something you allow when resistance ends. And resistance ends when you stop trying to make something happen and instead rest in the assumption that it already has. This is why rest is not laziness. Rest is faith in motion. Once the subconscious accepts an idea as true, it immediately begins coordinating reality. It speaks through people. It arranges meetings, it influences timing, it uncovers forgotten resources. It creates bridges of events so natural you could never trace them back to the moment of creation. And often the first signs appear within 24 hours. A message you didn't expect, a call you weren't waiting for, an opportunity that seems random, money from a forgotten source, not because you forced anything, but because the command was received. Most people wait for evidence before they allow themselves to feel secure, but this reverses the law. Evidence follows feeling, not the other way around. The moment you feel supplied, the universe begins supplying. The moment you feel wealthy, wealth finds pathways to you. The moment you stop waiting, reality starts moving. This is the great reversal that changes everything. Think about how many times you've said, "Once I have money, I'll relax." But relaxation is the signal. Peace is the permission. Completion is the command. The universe mirrors the state you occupy, not the one you desire. Tonight, you will occupy the state of completion. As you prepare for sleep, you must drop all effort. Do not analyze how. Do not calculate timelines. Do not look for proof. These behaviors signal doubt. Instead, you will do something far more powerful. You will feel gratitude for something already accomplished. Gratitude is not a reaction. It is a declaration of ownership. You do not thank for what you hope to receive. You thank for what you have already accepted as yours. This is why gratitude accelerates manifestation so rapidly. It carries the emotional signature of possession. Now listen carefully. When you lie down tonight, let your body relax completely. Allow your breathing to slow. Let the day fade. As your mind drifts towards sleep, quietly speak this phrase not as a wish, not as a request, but as a settled fact. Thank you. It is done. Do not rush it. Do not repeat it mechanically. Speak it once, maybe twice, and let the feeling behind it expand. Feel the relief of resolution. Feel the quiet confidence of knowing the matter is settled. Let your body respond as if the burden has been lifted, because it has. Then stop. Do nothing else. Do not argue with the thought. Do not question it. Do not try to improve it. Rest. This is the most important part. Rest is the seal. Rest tells the subconscious that the instruction is complete. It tells the universe there is no resistance left to overcome. And then sleep. While you sleep, something remarkable happens. The subconscious mind begins its work without interference. It does not sleep, it coordinates, it adjusts. It moves pieces you could never reach consciously. And because the command was delivered in a state of acceptance, not struggle, it moves quickly. When you wake up, do not rush to check. Do not scan for proof. Begin the day as someone who knows the outcome is already in motion. This quiet confidence is not pretending, it is alignment. Often, The first response comes subtly, a shift in mood, a sense of ease, a strange calm where anxiety once lived. This is not imagination. It is confirmation. The inner state has changed, and the outer must follow. Within 24 hours, you may notice something tangible. It may not arrive in the form you expected. The universe is far more creative than the human mind. But it will move. And once it does, you will never see reality the same way again. This is how wealth actually begins. Not with effort, but with identity, not with chasing, but with assuming, not with force, but with finality. The moment you truly accept that your supply is already established, life reorganizes around that truth. And the more you practice this, the faster the response becomes. Because the subconscious learns your authority. It recognizes when you speak from certainty rather than hope. You were never meant to beg life. You were meant to command it through alignment. Tonight is not about changing the universe. It is about changing your position within it. From seeker to owner, from waiting to knowing, from effort to assumption. If you fall asleep in certainty, you wake up to movement. Remember this always. The universe does not delay, it reflects. The only time you ever experience waiting is when your inner state is divided. When certainty replaces conflict, time collapses. Tonight, speak the end. Tonight, rest. Tonight, allow the unseen to move. And tomorrow, watch carefully. The response has already begun. When the universe responds, it rarely announces itself with thunder. It moves quietly, precisely, arranging circumstances so naturally that only those who understand the law recognize what has occurred. Others may call it coincidence. They may say things just worked out. But you will know the truth. You will know that what unfolded was not random, but the inevitable result of an assumption accepted as final. Most people miss the moment of response because they are looking for fireworks. They expect dramatic events, instant transformations, or overwhelming proof. But the universe prefers subtlety. It begins with alignment. A phone call that comes at the right moment. A conversation that opens a door. A thought that leads you somewhere you wouldn't normally go. These are not accidents. They are coordinated movements set in motion long before you became aware of them. This is why impatience is the greatest enemy of manifestation, not because it slows the universe, but because it reveals inner doubt. The moment you start wondering if it worked, you are speaking a new command. You are telling the subconscious the work is unfinished. That is why rest is sacred. Rest is not inactivity. It is confidence embodied. You must understand something deeply now. Once the subconscious accepts a command, it cannot reverse it unless you issue a new one. It does not debate. It does not negotiate. It executes. The only way to interfere is to contradict yourself emotionally. That is why the feeling you carry through the next day matters more than anything you say. If fear arises, do not fight it. Fighting gives it energy. Simply return to the feeling of completion. Remind yourself gently, without effort, that it is already done. This is not repetition for persuasion. It is remembrance of a decision already made. The reason this works so quickly is because wealth is not created from the outside in. It is released from the inside out. Money is not something you chase. It is something that responds. Opportunities do not need to be hunted. They appear when you occupy the state they require. There is a subtle shift that happens when you truly accept abundance as settled. You stop grasping. You stop forcing. You stop trying to control every outcome. And paradoxically, this is when control returns to you. Not through effort, but through alignment. Think about how differently you move when you know something is handled. Your posture changes. Your tone softens. Your mind clears. This internal shift is visible even if you don't realize it. People respond differently to you. Situations resolve more easily. Doors open without struggle. This is the universe recognizing congruence. Congruence is power. Most people live in contradiction. They say they want wealth, but feel unsafe. They speak affirmations, but live in anxiety. The subconscious responds to the dominant state, not the spoken desire. That is why the moment before sleep is so important. It determines which state becomes dominant. If you go to sleep feeling complete, that feeling gains authority. It begins to outweigh old habits of worry. Over time, it replaces them entirely. This is how permanent change occurs. Not through effort, but through repetition of certainty. The phrase you spoke before sleep is not magic by itself. Its power comes from what it represents: finality, completion, acceptance. When you say, "Thank you, it is done," you are stepping out of the role of seeker and into the role of receiver. The universe only responds to receivers. Receiving is not passive, it is a decision. It is the decision to stop arguing with reality and allow it to reorganize. As the hours pass, remain neutral. Neutrality is strength. Do not swing between excitement and doubt. Emotional extremes destabilize the signal. Calm expectation is the highest frequency. It tells the subconscious there is nothing left to resolve, and when something arrives, no matter how small, acknowledge it internally. Gratitude reinforces the state of possession. Each acknowledgement strengthens the pattern. Each confirmation accelerates the next response. This is how momentum builds, quietly, steadily, inevitably. You may find that once this begins working, old beliefs surface. Thoughts like, "This is too easy," or "This can't last." These are echoes of past conditioning. They are not truth. Do not engage them. Let them pass like background noise. The universe does not respond to fleeting thoughts. It responds to accepted states. Wealth is not fragile. It does not disappear because of a passing doubt. Once the subconscious has accepted abundance as normal, it seeks consistency. It works to maintain the state you have claimed. This is why some people seem to recover quickly even after losses. Their inner assumption remains intact. The goal is not to manifest once. The goal is to shift identity. Tonight's practice is not about a single outcome. It is about establishing authority within yourself. The authority to decide what is true. The authority to rest in completion. The authority to stop asking permission from circumstances. When you realize that your inner state precedes every outer event, fear loses its grip. You no longer feel at the mercy of timing or chance. You understand that life responds to alignment, not effort. This understanding changes the way you approach everything. Money, relationships, health, opportunity. You stop chasing and start selecting. You stop reacting and start assuming. You stop waiting and start allowing. And the universe, recognizing clarity, responds faster. Tonight is not the end of the process. It is the beginning of a new relationship with reality. A relationship built on trust, not tension. On certainty, not struggle. On assumption, not hope. Each night you can return to this state. Each night you can reaffirm completion. Not because it hasn't worked, but because it feels natural to live from the end. Over time, this becomes your default position, and from that position, wealth flows without resistance. You were never meant to fight life. You were meant to align with it. As you move forward, remember this: the universe does not test you. It reflects you. When you change the assumption, the reflection must change. There is no exception. Sleep tonight with peace. Wake tomorrow with expectation. Move through the day with quiet confidence. The command has been issued. The response is inevitable, and the process has already begun. What happens next is where most people unknowingly step out of alignment. They receive the first sign, the first movement, the first subtle confirmation, and instead of remaining settled, they rush back into effort. They start asking how to make it happen faster. They begin monitoring every detail, and in doing so they re-enter the very state that kept them waiting in the first place. You must understand this clearly. The universe does not need supervision. Once the command has been received, it requires only consistency of state, not constant attention. The more you trust the process, the more efficiently it unfolds. Trust is not blind belief. Trust is the absence of inner interference. There is a quiet authority that develops when you stop needing proof. This authority is felt, not forced. It expresses itself as calm, as patience without strain, as certainty without arrogance. This is the state that allows wealth to stabilize rather than arrive and disappear. Many people can manifest a sudden opportunity. Few can sustain abundance. The difference is not knowledge, it is identity. If you see yourself as someone who occasionally gets lucky, wealth will come and go. If you see yourself as someone for whom supply is normal, wealth stays. This is why the practice before sleep is not something you do once and forget. It is something you return to until it feels ordinary, until the feeling of being supported no longer feels like imagination, but like memory. When abundance feels familiar, reality has no choice but to make it visible. Pay attention to the language you use with yourself throughout the day. Not what you say out loud, but the quiet conclusions you draw internally. Every time you conclude that things are working out, you reinforce alignment. Every time you assume delay or difficulty, you introduce resistance. This is not about policing your thoughts. It is about noticing which assumptions you are feeding. If a challenge appears, do not label it as a setback. Label it as movement. Often, reality reorganizes by temporarily disrupting old patterns. A closed door is not a rejection, it is a redirection. When you remain anchored in certainty, even obstacles become instruments. You may notice that as this state deepens, your desires begin to change. Not because you are settling, but because clarity replaces craving. You no longer want money to escape fear. You want it as an extension of ease. This shift is critical. Desires born from fear bind you to effort. Desires born from wholeness flow naturally. This is why the universe responds fastest when you no longer need it to prove anything. Need creates tension. Wholeness creates movement. There is a moment in this process when something inside you clicks. A moment when you realize you are no longer waiting. You may still want things. You may still set goals, but the urgency is gone, and when urgency disappears, power returns. Power is not loud. Power is settled. Power assumes. From this place, you stop asking, will it work, and start living as if it already has. You plan differently. You speak differently. You make decisions from sufficiency instead of scarcity. And these decisions compound faster than any affirmation ever could. Remember, wealth is not attracted by desire. It is attracted by congruence. When your inner state matches the reality you seek, manifestation is no longer effortful. It becomes mechanical. This is the law operating exactly as designed. As you continue this practice, nights become anchors. Each night reinforces the identity you are choosing. Each morning reflects it back in small, precise ways. Over time, the reflection grows clearer, louder, more undeniable. And eventually you stop being surprised. You stop calling it manifestation. You stop calling it luck. You recognize it as alignment. This is the point where struggle ends permanently. Not because challenges disappear, but because they no longer define you. You move through them without resistance. You solve without panic. You trust without hesitation. You have issued the command. You have entered rest. You have aligned with completion. From here, the universe does what it has always done best. It responds. And as the universe responds, you begin to notice something even more profound than money or opportunity. You begin to notice yourself. The way you think shifts. The way you feel in silence changes. The constant inner noise that once demanded reassurance starts to fade. This is the real confirmation. Before anything arrives externally, something settles internally. And that settling is the signal that the law is working. Most people spend their lives chasing outcomes, never realizing that the true transformation always happens first in consciousness. The moment you stop measuring your worth by circumstances, circumstances lose their power over you. This is why those who truly understand this law are calm even before the evidence appears. They are not pretending. They are aligned. You may still remember the old version of yourself, the one who checked balances with anxiety. The one who counted days, worried about timing, feared running out. That version doesn't vanish overnight. It fades as a habit fades. Each night you return to completion, you weaken the old identity. Each morning you move from certainty, you strengthen the new one. This is how change becomes permanent. There is no force involved. No willpower. No pressure. Just consistency of assumption. Reality reshapes itself around what you repeatedly accept as normal. And the most powerful assumptions are not spoken loudly. They are lived quietly. You will notice that when abundance begins to stabilize, you no longer feel the need to talk about it. You don't announce it. You don't prove it. You simply live from it. This silence is not secrecy. It is confidence. The universe recognizes confidence immediately. If at any point doubt tries to return, do not treat it as an enemy. Doubt is only the echo of an old pattern losing its authority. Acknowledge it, then return to rest. Rest is always the answer. Rest tells the subconscious that nothing has gone wrong. Remember, creation is not fragile. You cannot break what has already been accepted as true. Once a state is impressed deeply enough, it expresses itself automatically. This is why repetition before sleep matters. Not to convince the universe, but to normalize the state within you. Eventually, you reach a point where you no longer need the phrase. The words fall away because the feeling remains. And when the feeling remains, manifestation becomes effortless. This is the mark of mastery. You begin to see that wealth is not something you attract once and lose. It is a natural consequence of alignment. It flows to where it is expected. It stays where it is welcomed without fear. It multiplies where it is handled with ease. And ease is the final lesson. Life was never meant to be a constant struggle. That belief was inherited, not true. The universe operates through harmony, not resistance. When you align your inner state with completion, you stop fighting the current and start moving with it. Tonight is simply the doorway. Each night after this, you will recognize the same opportunity to let go, to settle, to assume, to rest. And each time you do, the response becomes faster, smoother, more precise. You are not commanding the universe through force. You are commanding it through clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about what is true. Clarity about what is finished. And once clarity is established, reality has no choice but to comply. Sleep knowing the command has been issued. Wake knowing movement is inevitable. Live knowing supply is not coming. It is already here. This is not hope. This is law. And it has already begun. And when this understanding settles fully within you, something irreversible happens. You stop outsourcing power to circumstances. You no longer ask life for permission to feel secure. Security becomes internal. And when security becomes internal, the outer world reorganizes itself to match it. This is the moment most people never reach. They learn techniques, repeat phrases, visualize outcomes, but they never allow the identity shift to complete. They still see themselves as someone trying to change their life instead of someone who has already changed. Tonight closes that gap. From this point forward, you are not experimenting. You are operating from knowledge. Knowledge that reality follows consciousness. Knowledge that the unseen always precedes the seen. Knowledge that once an assumption is accepted, expression is inevitable. You may notice that as this becomes your default state, you feel less reactive. Problems no longer feel personal. Delays no longer feel threatening. You understand that nothing is working against you. Everything is responding to alignment, even when the path isn't immediately visible. This calm is not resignation, it is mastery. Mastery is knowing when to act and when to rest, knowing when to speak and when to be silent, knowing that the most powerful command you can ever give is the one that ends effort entirely. This is why the moment before sleep is so important. It is the one time each day when you can step out of the world and return to yourself, when you can release every role, every expectation, every fear, and simply choose what is true. In that space, your decision becomes law. Tonight, you are not hoping for wealth. You are not asking for relief. You are not bargaining with the universe. You are declaring completion, and completion carries a weight that nothing can resist. As you continue to live from this place, you may find yourself guiding others without trying. Your presence shifts. Your words carry certainty. People sense stability around you. This is not charisma, it is congruence. And congruence is magnetic. The universe responds most powerfully to those who are no longer divided within themselves. There will be moments when you look back and realize how much energy you once spent worrying about things that now resolve effortlessly. Not because you became lucky, but because you became aligned. This reflection is one of the greatest confirmations of all. Remember, the universe does not test you to see if you are worthy. It reflects you to show you who you believe you are. When you believe yourself to be supplied, supported and secure, the reflection must change. From this night forward, let sleep be sacred. Let it be the place where you return to certainty. Let it be the moment you stop carrying tomorrow's concerns and instead rest in today's completion. You do not need to force the response. You do not need to chase outcomes. You do not need to watch the clock. The command has already been received. And now you rest. And in this rest, something deeper reveals itself. You begin to understand that wealth was never the destination. It was the signal. The signal that you had finally stopped resisting yourself, that you had stopped arguing with life, that you had stepped into agreement with the part of you that always knew support was natural. This is why the universe responds so cleanly when you stop needing proof. Proof is a symptom of doubt. Certainty does not look outward for confirmation. Certainty lives inwardly, and the outer world eventually catches up. When you truly accept this, you stop asking, "Why hasn't it happened yet?" Because the question no longer makes sense. You are no longer waiting for something to begin. You know it already has. From this state, you don't chase money, you notice it. You don't beg for opportunity, you recognize it. You don't fear loss, because you understand supply is not external. It flows from alignment, and alignment is always available. This is why those who master this law are unshakable. Circumstances may change, numbers may fluctuate, situations may evolve, but the inner state remains intact. And because the inner state remains intact, restoration is always faster than loss. Tonight was never about convincing the universe. It was about convincing yourself. Not through force, not through repetition, but through surrender to what you chose as true. You chose completion, you chose certainty, you chose rest, and those choices carry authority. As this understanding deepens, life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a dialogue. You speak through assumption. Life responds through circumstance. The conversation becomes fluid, precise, and increasingly effortless. This is the natural rhythm of creation. There is nothing mystical left to chase once you see this clearly. There is only application. Quiet, consistent, unremarkable application. Night after night, day after day, until the state you once practiced becomes the state you live from. And when that happens, wealth is no longer something you manifest. It is something that follows you. Because you are no longer asking for permission. You are no longer negotiating with fear. You are no longer waiting to feel safe. You decided, and the universe responded. Let this night be remembered not as the moment you tried something new, but as the moment you stopped trying altogether, the moment you rested into certainty, the moment you allowed alignment to do what effort never could. Sleep knowing the matter is settled, wake knowing movement is inevitable, live knowing supply is constant. The command has been given. The response is unfolding, and from here forward, life reflects what you have already accepted as true. And as this becomes clearer, you realize there is nothing dramatic left to do, no final push, no last effort, no desperate action. The most powerful phase has already been entered. The phase where life begins meeting you halfway without being asked. This is where many people misinterpret what's happening. They think they've become passive. In truth, they've become precise. Their actions are no longer driven by fear or urgency. They move when it feels natural. They pause when it feels complete. And because their actions are aligned instead of reactive, they carry far more impact. You may notice that decisions feel easier now. You don't second-guess every choice. You don't overanalyze every possibility. This is not recklessness. It is clarity. When the inner state is settled, the mind no longer scrambles for control. It trusts the current it's moving in, and the universe responds to that trust. One of the clearest signs that the command has taken root is how you relate to time. You stop counting hours. You stop measuring progress. You stop checking to see if something worked. Time loses its emotional charge because you are no longer waiting for permission to relax. Relaxation is no longer postponed. Peace is no longer conditional. Certainty is no longer fragile. This is when manifestation stops feeling like a practice and starts feeling like a principle. Something you rely on rather than experiment with. Something as dependable as gravity, operating whether you think about it or not. The more you live from this understanding, the more obvious it becomes that the universe has always been responsive. The only difference now is that you are speaking its language fluently. Not through words, but through states of being. States are commands. A state of lack commands limitation. A state of struggle commands resistance. A state of completion commands flow. And you have chosen completion. You may still remember the nights when worry followed you into sleep, when tomorrow felt heavy before it arrived, when rest felt impossible because your mind was always negotiating with fear. That version of you didn't fail. They simply didn't know what you know now. Knowledge changes posture. Posture changes response. From here on, each night is an opportunity to reinforce what is already true. Not because it might fade, but because it feels right to return to certainty. Just as you would return home after a long day, you return to completion before sleep. There is no tension in this. There is no urgency. There is no waiting, only alignment, and alignment is silent power. As you continue, you will notice something subtle but unmistakable. Life begins to surprise you less. Not because nothing new happens, but because you expect support. When support arrives, it feels familiar, not shocking. This familiarity is the signature of a new normal taking shape. Normal is powerful. What feels normal persists. What feels abnormal fades. When wealth feels normal, it stays. When ease feels normal, it returns. When support feels normal, it multiplies. And this is why the true shift happens quietly, without announcements, without proof-seeking, without explanation. You simply live from a different assumption, and reality adjusts accordingly. This is the final understanding. You were never meant to chase the universe. You were meant to align with it, and alignment is achieved not through effort, but through acceptance. Tonight, you accepted completion. Tonight, you rested. Tonight, you allowed the command to stand without interference. From here forward, the unfolding is inevitable. You don't need to hurry it. You don't need to manage it. You don't need to explain it. Just live from what you have already decided. Because the universe already has, and as this understanding anchors itself more deeply, something subtle yet powerful takes place. You stop trying to prove anything to yourself or to anyone else. You no longer feel the urge to explain why things are working or how they came together. Explanation belongs to the mind that doubts. Certainty requires none. This is when life begins to feel cooperative rather than confrontational. You no longer feel as though you are pushing against invisible resistance. Instead, you feel carried, supported, met, not because circumstances suddenly became perfect, but because your relationship with them changed. You start to notice that the universe doesn't rush, but it also doesn't stall. It moves with precision. It brings what matches your state, not your urgency. And when your state is settled, the delivery is clean. This is why so many people remain stuck, even after discovering these principles. They understand them intellectually, but they never let themselves rest into them emotionally. They keep one foot in certainty and one foot in fear. And the universe reflects the division. But you are no longer divided. You chose completion. You chose rest. You chose to trust the law rather than test it. And the law responds best to those who no longer demand reassurance. From here, your role is simple. Not easy in the sense of effort, but simple in the sense of clarity. When thoughts arise that suggest lack, you do not wrestle with them. Wrestling gives them life. You simply return to the feeling of completion the same way you would return to your breath, gently, naturally, without urgency. Over time, you realize you are no longer maintaining a state. You are living in it. This is when identity shifts fully. You no longer see yourself as someone who is becoming abundant. You see yourself as someone who expects support. Someone for whom solutions appear. Someone whose needs are met without drama. This expectation is not entitlement. It is alignment, and alignment is magnetic. You will notice that even when unexpected expenses or challenges arise, they no longer trigger panic. You handle them from sufficiency, not scarcity. You respond instead of react, and often the resolution appears faster than the problem did. This is not because problems disappear. It is because your state no longer feeds them. The universe cannot sustain what you do not emotionally invest in. When fear loses your attention, it loses its fuel. When certainty becomes your default, it becomes your reality. This is the quiet power that most people never discover, not because it is hidden, but because it requires letting go rather than doing more. And letting go feels unfamiliar to a world trained on effort. But now, letting go feels natural. As days pass, you may realize that what you once called manifestation now feels like cooperation. Life meets you where you stand. And because you are standing in certainty, it meets you with provision. This is not the end of the journey, it is the end of the struggle. From here, you refine, you deepen, you apply the same principle to every area of life, not with force, but with clarity, health, relationships, creativity, purpose. The law does not change its behavior. Only the assumption does, and you have learned how to choose it. Remember this always. The universe is not something outside of you that must be persuaded. It is the mirror of your inner state. When the state changes, the reflection must follow. You have issued the command, not through words alone, but through acceptance. You have rested not because you gave up, but because you understood. You have aligned not by effort, but by certainty. And from this alignment, wealth is no longer a question. It is a consequence. Sleep when it is time. Act when it is natural. Trust when there is nothing left to prove. The command stands. The response continues, and the unfolding is already underway. And with each passing day, this truth settles more deeply into your awareness. You begin to realize that the universe has always been responsive. It was never withholding. It was never testing you. It was simply reflecting the certainty or uncertainty you carried within. This realization brings a quiet humility. Not the kind that diminishes you, but the kind that frees you. You stop trying to control outcomes because you understand that control was never the source of power. Alignment was. And alignment begins the moment you stop insisting and start allowing. You may notice that your desires now arrive with less emotional charge. You still appreciate them. You still welcome them. But you no longer cling. Clinging belongs to lack. Appreciation belongs to abundance. And the universe always responds to the state, not the words. This is why wealth begins to flow more steadily now, not in chaotic bursts, but in ways that feel sustainable, logical, almost ordinary. And that ordinariness is the sign you've crossed the threshold. What once felt extraordinary now feels expected, and expectation is a powerful stabilizer. You are no longer impressed by small wins, nor discouraged by temporary delays. You see both as part of the same movement. One does not inflate you. The other does not shake you. This emotional neutrality is not indifference. It is mastery. Mastery is calm. When calm becomes your baseline, the universe responds with consistency. It brings you what matches steadiness, not volatility. It supports what feels grounded, not frantic. And because your inner world has stabilized, the outer world begins to mirror that stability. This is when wealth stops feeling like something you're chasing and starts feeling like something that accompanies you. Like a natural extension of your life rather than a destination you're trying to reach. You may reflect on how different this feels from the way you once lived, back when every decision carried weight, when every expense triggered tension, when the future felt fragile. That version of you was not wrong. They were simply operating from incomplete understanding. Now, understanding has replaced anxiety, knowing has replaced hoping, rest has replaced struggle, and with that replacement, the universe responds with ease. From here forward, you don't need to announce your intentions. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to justify your calm. Your inner certainty speaks for you, and life listens. If you ever find yourself drifting back into old patterns, remember this moment. Remember that nothing external needed to change for everything internal to settle. And once the internal settled, the external had no choice but to follow. This is the law in its simplest form. This is creation without force. This is wealth without tension. You have learned how to speak the language of completion. You have learned how to rest without fear. You have learned how to allow reality to meet you where you stand. And now you live from that place, not waiting, not chasing, not questioning, simply aligned. The command remains, the response continues, and the unfolding is no longer something you anticipate. It is something you live. And living from this place changes the way you experience everything. You no longer measure your days by what went wrong or what still needs fixing. You measure them by a quieter metric: how steady you remained, how little you were shaken, how naturally you trusted the unfolding. This steadiness becomes its own reward long before anything external confirms it. You begin to sense that life is no longer something happening to you, but something moving with you. The invisible resistance you once felt is gone, replaced by a subtle cooperation. You don't push against circumstances anymore. You meet them. And because you meet them from certainty, they soften. This is when you realize that wealth was never meant to arrive with drama. Drama belongs to effort. Drama belongs to fear. True supply moves silently, like a tide that rises without announcing itself. One day you simply notice that what once caused anxiety no longer does. And that realization carries more value than any number ever could. You stop telling yourself stories about how hard things are, not because you are avoiding reality, but because reality no longer demands that narrative. The mind quiets when it no longer needs to defend against lack. And in that quiet, clarity grows. Clarity changes choice. You choose differently now, not impulsively, not cautiously, but confidently. Your decisions are no longer reactions to pressure, they are expressions of alignment. And because of that, even small choices carry weight. They compound. They lead you naturally into environments, conversations, and opportunities that match who you have become. This is how the universe responds most clearly, not with sudden miracles alone, but with coherence. Everything begins to make sense. Pieces that once felt disconnected start fitting together. Timing feels precise instead of cruel, and you understand that nothing was wasted. Every moment led here. Here is where the struggle ended, not when something arrived, but when you stopped needing it to arrive in order to feel whole. From this state, you don't cling to outcomes, you welcome them, and that difference is everything. What is welcomed stays. What is clung to resists. The universe mirrors the way you hold things. And now, you hold life lightly. If you ever forget, return to this simplicity. Return to completion. Return to rest. The law does not require complexity. It requires clarity. One clear assumption, deeply accepted, outweighs years of effort built on doubt. You are no longer learning this. You are living it. The night is no longer something you fear or rush through. It has become a place of return, a place where you release the day and reaffirm what is already true. And each time you do, the alignment deepens. The response continues not because you keep asking, but because you stopped contradicting. And in that silence, life moves. And as life moves, you notice that you are no longer bracing yourself for the next challenge. There is no tightening in your chest when you think about the future. No mental rehearsal of worst-case scenarios. The future no longer feels like a threat that must be managed. It feels like an extension of a decision already made. This is one of the clearest signs that the inner command has taken hold. When you no longer feel the need to protect yourself from tomorrow, tomorrow begins to support you. Protection is a posture of fear. Trust is a posture of authority. And authority is what the universe recognizes instantly. You may notice that you sleep more deeply now, not because life is perfect, but because your mind is no longer at war with itself. Sleep becomes restorative instead of restless, and this matters more than most people realize. A rested mind does not create from panic, it creates from clarity. Clarity is creative. From this place, even effort feels different. When action is required, you take it without strain. When patience is required, you wait without anxiety. You are no longer forcing momentum. You are cooperating with it, and cooperation always moves faster than resistance. This is where people on the outside begin to notice something has changed. They may not know what it is. They may not be able to name it, but they feel it. They feel your steadiness. They feel your confidence. They feel the absence of desperation, and that absence is magnetic. The world responds differently to those who are not asking to be saved. It responds to those who have decided. This decision does not make you rigid. It makes you flexible. When you are not afraid of losing, you adapt easily. When you are not desperate to gain, you choose wisely. And because your choices are no longer driven by urgency, they align more cleanly with opportunity. This is how wealth integrates into life rather than disrupting it. You are no longer chasing a breakthrough. You are living from a breakthrough that already happened internally. And because it already happened internally, it must eventually appear externally. That is not optimism. That is sequence, inner first, outer second, always. If at any moment you feel tempted to return to effort, pause. Not to correct yourself, but to remember. Remember that the work was finished the moment you accepted completion. Everything after that is simply expression. You do not need to improve the command. You do not need to repeat it out of fear. You do not need to add anything to it. Simplicity is power. The universe does not require constant instruction. It requires consistency of state. And the state you have chosen, completion, certainty, rest, speaks louder than any words ever could. As days turn into weeks, you may realize that your relationship with money has changed completely. It no longer defines your safety. It no longer controls your mood. It no longer feels like a measure of your worth. And paradoxically, this is when it begins to flow more freely. Money follows respect, not fear. It stays where it is not worshipped. It multiplies where it is handled calmly. This calm handling is not indifference. It is understanding that supply is not external. It is responsive, and responsiveness increases when pressure disappears. This is the quiet wisdom behind everything you have experienced. You did not command the universe by force. You commanded it by ending the argument within yourself. And once the argument ended, the response began. From this point on, life will continue to confirm what you have already accepted, not always loudly, not always immediately, but always faithfully. Because the universe does not forget a settled assumption, let each night continue to be a return to certainty. Let each morning be an unfolding of it. Let each day be lived without rehearsal of fear. You have stepped into alignment. You have entered rest. You have chosen completion. And from here, the response is not something you wait for. It is something that continues. And as it continues, you begin to understand something that once felt impossible to grasp. The universe was never outside of you, watching, judging, or deciding when to respond. It was always moving through the channel of your own acceptance. The moment you accepted completion, you opened the channel fully. This is why nothing feels forced now. There is no strain in believing, no effort in trusting, no tension in waiting. Waiting itself has dissolved because you are no longer oriented toward the future. You are anchored in the present, and the present is where creation happens. You may notice that even silence feels different. Where silence once felt heavy or uncertain, it now feels spacious, peaceful, alive. This is not emptiness. It is readiness. The kind of readiness that does not rush, because it knows what is coming will arrive in its own perfect sequence. Sequence matters. When the inner state leads, the outer follows in order. Not all at once, not chaotically, but in a way that integrates smoothly into your life. This is how wealth becomes sustainable rather than overwhelming. It arrives in harmony with who you have become. You no longer feel like you need to prove anything to life. You are no longer negotiating. You are no longer justifying why things should work out. That conversation has ended, and when the conversation ends, movement begins. This is the great paradox. The universe moves fastest when you stop chasing it. What once felt like effort now feels like alignment. What once felt like struggle now feels like flow. What once felt uncertain now feels inevitable. Inevitable does not mean dramatic. It means settled. From this place, you trust your timing without watching the clock. You trust your path without needing reassurance. You trust the unfolding without needing to understand every step. Understanding comes later, in hindsight, when you look back and realize how perfectly everything lined up, and you will look back. You will look back at the nights when worry followed you to bed and wonder how you ever lived that way. You will look back at the days when money felt heavy and realize it was never money that weighed you down. It was the assumption you carried about it. That assumption has changed, and because it has changed, everything connected to it must change as well. This is not a temporary state. It is a foundation, a new baseline. From here, growth does not feel like effort. Expansion does not feel dangerous. Receiving does not feel undeserved. It feels natural. Natural is the key. What feels natural persists. What feels natural repeats. What feels natural multiplies. You have made abundance natural. You have made support normal. You have made completion familiar, and the universe reflects familiarity with consistency. As you move forward, remember that there is nothing to defend, nothing to hold tightly, nothing to chase. Life is responding to you because you are no longer resisting it. Each night remains a quiet return, each morning remains an unfolding, each day remains a confirmation, not because you demand it, but because you decided. The command was simple, the acceptance was final, the response was immediate, and now it continues steadily, faithfully, and without resistance, because the universe always responds to what you have already accepted as true. And in this continuation, you stop looking for an ending because you realize there isn't one. This is not a moment that peaks and fades, it is a state that stabilizes and deepens. Life no longer feels like a series of events you must survive. It feels like a rhythm you are moving within. You begin to sense that even when nothing outward seems to change on a given day, something is still unfolding. Beneath the surface, alignments are forming. Conversations are being set up. Timing is being adjusted. The absence of visible movement no longer troubles you, because you understand that stillness is not stagnation. It is preparation. Preparation does not require your effort, it requires your trust, and trust is now familiar to you. There was a time when trust felt risky, even irresponsible, when letting go felt like giving up control. But now you see the truth. Control was never in the tightening, it was always in the alignment. The more you relax into certainty, the more precisely life responds. This is why fear no longer dominates your thinking. Fear depends on uncertainty to survive. When uncertainty dissolves, fear has nothing to attach to. It may appear briefly like a shadow passing through, but it no longer stays. You do not invite it. You do not argue with it. You simply remain in what you know. Knowing is quiet. Knowing is steady. Knowing does not need reinforcement. From this place, you realize that even if something were to shift unexpectedly, you would be fine. Not because you have guarantees, but because you have grounding. And grounding is the true source of resilience. It allows you to adapt without panic, to respond without collapse, to move forward without hesitation. This inner grounding is what wealth recognizes and supports. Wealth does not respond to desperation. It responds to stability. It flows toward those who can receive it without fear and hold it without tension. You have become that person, not through effort, not through forcing belief, but through acceptance, acceptance of completion, acceptance of sufficiency, acceptance of support. As this acceptance continues, you may notice a quiet gratitude arising without effort. Not gratitude for a specific thing, but gratitude for the state itself, for the absence of pressure, for the ease of breathing, for the feeling that life is no longer something you must outrun. This gratitude is not directed outward, it is anchored inward. And inward gratitude is powerful. It reinforces the state that created it. It stabilizes the assumption that everything is handled. And the universe, ever responsive, continues to mirror that handling with provision, opportunity, and ease. You no longer need reminders. You no longer need reassurance. You no longer need to test the law. You are living it, and as you live it, life responds, not because you demand it, but because you are aligned with how it works. This is the continuation. This is the unfolding. This is the state you now return to, naturally, effortlessly, again and again. The command remains active, the response remains in motion, and you remain at rest within it, and resting within it, you come to see that nothing ever needed to be chased. What you once pursued was simply waiting for you to stop running. The universe does not reward urgency. It responds to clarity, and clarity has become your natural state. You no longer wake up scanning the day for signs of danger or lack. You wake up with an underlying sense that things are handled, even before you know how. This feeling is not Navi optimism. It is grounded knowing. the kind that doesn't need reassurance because it isn't built on conditions. From this place, even uncertainty feels different. It no longer feels like threat, it feels like openness, possibility, space for something new to arrive. You trust that whatever enters that space will match the state you are holding, and because the state is settled, what arrives is supportive. This is when life begins to feel generous, not extravagant in a dramatic sense, but generous in timing, in flow, in how often things line up without friction. You begin to experience fewer dead ends and more redirections, fewer blocks and more openings. And when something doesn't move, you no longer interpret it as failure. You recognize it as calibration. Calibration is gentle. Calibration is intelligent. Calibration serves alignment. You have learned that the universe is not trying to teach you lessons through struggle. It is simply reflecting the level of agreement within you. When you are at peace, life mirrors peace. When you are settled, life arranges itself efficiently. When you are certain, reality becomes cooperative. This is why you no longer feel the need to label things as good or bad. You see movement as movement. Everything is part of the same unfolding, and this perspective alone dissolves enormous amounts of resistance. Resistance was never required. Struggle was never demanded. Effort was never the currency. Alignment was, and alignment has become your home. You may still remember the exact night this shifted. The moment you stopped asking and started accepting. The moment the phrase was spoken not as hope, but as fact. That moment did not fade. It set a tone. And that tone continues to resonate through your days. Resonance is creation extended. What you felt then continues now. What you accepted then still operates. What you rested into then remains active. This is why the response does not stop after one day. The 24 hours were not the limit. They were the beginning of visible confirmation. The law does not expire. It continues as long as the assumption remains intact. And it does, because you are no longer maintaining it. You are living from it. From here, life unfolds without the weight it once carried. You meet it with steadiness. You walk through it with confidence. You receive from it without fear. And the universe, recognizing agreement, continues to respond in kind. This is not an ending. It is a new baseline. A baseline where wealth is normal, support is expected, and rest is deserved. The command was clear. The acceptance was real. The response is ongoing. And now, you simply live, and living from this new baseline, you no longer feel the need to search for signs that you are on the right path. The path feels beneath your feet. Each step carries a quiet assurance that you are supported, even when you don't yet see the destination. This assurance is not emotional excitement. It is steadiness, and steadiness is the true mark of alignment. You begin to recognize how different this feels from the old cycle of anticipation and disappointment. There is no emotional spike followed by collapse, no temporary hope that fades when results don't appear instantly. Instead, there is continuity, a sense that life is unfolding in layers, each one arriving when it fits naturally into your experience. This continuity changes how you relate to success. Success no longer feels like something you must reach or defend. It feels like something you grow into, something that expands alongside your capacity to receive it calmly. And because you are calm, expansion no longer feels threatening. You trust yourself now in a way you didn't before. Not because you have all the answers, but because you trust the state you are operating from. You know that decisions made from certainty carry different outcomes than decisions made from fear, and this trust removes hesitation from your actions. When you act cleanly. When you pause without guilt. When you receive without tension. This balance is rare, and the universe responds to it generously. You may notice that even challenges arrive differently now. They do not arrive as crises. They arrive as invitations to adjust, to refine, to move slightly in a new direction. And because you are no longer afraid of losing ground, you respond with intelligence instead of urgency. Urgency once drained you. Now clarity sustains you. This is the rhythm you have stepped into. A rhythm where effort is purposeful, rest is honored, and results unfold without resistance. It is not passive. It is precise. And precision always outperforms force. As this rhythm stabilizes, you may realize that what once felt like a leap of faith now feels like common sense. Of course, life responds to certainty. Of course, the inner state precedes the outer world. Of course, rest accelerates what struggle delays. These truths no longer feel abstract. They feel lived. And because they are lived, they continue to express. There is nothing more to wait for. Nothing more to prove, nothing more to secure. You have already stepped into agreement with the way creation works. From this agreement, wealth continues to flow in forms both expected and unexpected. Support continues to appear where it is needed, and ease continues to replace effort in ways that feel almost ordinary. This ordinariness is the final confirmation. What once felt miraculous now feels natural. What once felt distant now feels present. What once felt uncertain now feels inevitable. And so the unfolding continues, quietly, steadily, faithfully, not because you are trying to make it happen, but because you have stopped standing in its way, and standing out of its way, you finally see how little was ever required of you. Not perfection. Not constant focus, not endless belief, only willingness to settle into what you chose as true. That single shift removed the friction that once made life feel heavy. You may notice now that even when you think about money, the thought no longer carries urgency. It doesn't tighten your body or race your mind. It feels neutral, almost practical. This neutrality is powerful. It tells the subconscious that money is no longer tied to survival. And when survival pressure disappears, flow increases. This is why wealth often comes fastest when it is no longer needed to feel okay. The universe does not respond to need, it responds to readiness. And readiness is calm. You are calm now in a way that does not depend on circumstances. Even if something were to shift unexpectedly, you sense that you would recover quickly. Not because you are immune to change, but because your foundation is internal. And internal foundations do not collapse under external movement. This is the quiet confidence that changes everything. Confidence does not announce itself, it does not explain, it does not persuade, it simply exists, and existence is enough. As this confidence continues to stabilize, you may find that you naturally let go of habits that once kept you in tension. You don't force yourself to change them. They fall away because they no longer match who you are. Worry fades. Overthinking loosens. Comparison loses its grip. These shifts happen without effort because alignment always simplifies. Simplicity is a sign you are in sync. Life becomes less about managing and more about responding. You respond to what shows up instead of anticipating what might go wrong. And because you respond from certainty, outcomes resolve with less friction. This is when you realize that the universe has been responding all along. You simply weren't positioned to receive the response before. Now you are. Not because you worked harder, not because you proved yourself, but because you stopped contradicting yourself internally. The moment you accepted completion, reality began reorganizing. That reorganization did not stop after the first sign. It continues quietly, adjusting details, refining pathways, smoothing transitions. You don't need to monitor it. Monitoring implies doubt. Allowing implies trust, and trust is now natural. If at any point you feel tempted to return to old mental habits, remember this: nothing you gained through alignment can be lost through calm awareness. Fear is the only thing that disrupts flow, and fear no longer governs your decisions. You have moved beyond hoping. You have moved beyond waiting. You have moved beyond effort. You are living from agreement. Agreement with yourself. Agreement with life. Agreement with the law that governs creation. And because that agreement remains, the response does too, not as a single event, not as a fleeting moment, but as an ongoing experience of support, flow, and sufficiency. This is the continuation. This is the unfolding. This is the life that reflects what you have already accepted as true. And as this life continues to reflect your inner agreement, you begin to sense a deeper ease with yourself. You no longer feel the need to monitor your thoughts or correct every feeling. There is trust now, not only in the universe, but in your own awareness. You know when you are aligned, and you recognize immediately when something feels off, not with alarm, but with curiosity. This self-trust is essential. It means you no longer outsource authority to circumstances, opinions, or temporary results. You listen inwardly. And because you listen inwardly, your responses become cleaner, more accurate, less reactive. This is how momentum sustains itself without effort. You may notice that time itself feels different. Days no longer blur together under pressure. Weeks no longer feel like something you must get through. Time becomes spacious, and in that spaciousness, creativity returns. Ideas surface naturally, insights arrive without force. Solutions appear fully formed instead of pieced together through stress. This is not accidental. Creativity thrives in safety, and you have created safety within yourself. From this place, wealth is no longer a goal. It is a byproduct, a natural extension of clarity, stability, and ease. It flows where it can move without resistance, where it is not burdened with fear, where it is welcomed as a tool rather than a lifeline. You understand now why struggle was never required. Struggle was simply a symptom of misalignment. Once alignment was restored, struggle lost its purpose. You may still take action. You may still plan. You may still build and expand. But the energy behind these actions is entirely different. You are not trying to escape something. You are expressing something, and expression always feels lighter than escape. This is how life becomes cooperative. Even when uncertainty appears, it no longer feels like danger. It feels like openness, a reminder that you are not locked into a single outcome. That flexibility is available. That adjustment is natural. And because you are not rigid, life does not need to break you to move you. You move willingly. This willingness is the final alignment. It signals to the universe that you are no longer resisting change, no longer clinging to old structures, no longer afraid of movement. And the universe, responding to this openness, continues to deliver in ways that feel timely, relevant, and supportive. There is nothing left to force, nothing left to prove, nothing left to secure. What needed to shift has shifted. What needed to be accepted has been accepted. And now, life unfolds from that acceptance. Quietly, consistently, faithfully. The response does not end, it simply becomes your experience, and so this is where it settles. Not with a dramatic ending, not with a final instruction, but with a knowing that feels complete. You are no longer waiting for life to begin. You are no longer preparing for a future moment of relief. You are no longer asking the universe to prove anything to you. You already decided what is true. From that decision, everything else follows. Wealth no longer feels like something outside of you, something that may or may not arrive. It feels like a natural response to the state you live in. Support feels ordinary. Solutions feel timely. And even when you don't yet see the full picture, you trust that the movement is already underway. This trust is not blind. It is grounded. It is earned through experience. You felt the shift. You recognized the calm. You noticed the quiet rearranging. That is enough. From this point forward, nights are no longer filled with worry. They are moments of return, a return to completion, a return to certainty, a return to the understanding that nothing is missing and nothing needs to be forced. And mornings are no longer something you brace for. They are unfoldings, gentle confirmations that the command you issued continues to echo through your life. You don't rush the process. You don't interfere with it. You don't question it. You live, and life responds. Not because you are trying to make it respond, but because you are no longer contradicting it. The universe reflects what you accept. You accepted completion. You accepted sufficiency. You accepted rest. And that acceptance has weight. This is not a moment that passes. This is a state you return to, again and again, naturally, effortlessly. The command stands. The response continues, and what once felt distant is now simply part of your life. There is nothing left to add. It is done.